Hello everybody, welcome back to another video on my channel. Can you tell I've been working on something? This is a new project that I've been obsessing over, or you could argue it's an old project. So a whole bunch of years ago now, actually, 6 I think, I made this game on Roblox called Planetary Battlefronts, and it got a massive 130 plays or something. And that game may not have garnered much attention, but I was pretty pleased with the results. The only problems in my eyes were that I had made it on Roblox, or they stemmed from that. Roblox uses Lua. Lua is not very performant and not very pleasant to work with. The Roblox servers are also not very performant. So I found both of those things to be pretty limiting in the game design itself. The tools that Roblox exposes to you are they aren't that general. So it's a little hard to do interesting things with them unless you code a lot of it yourself in Lua and then you start losing performance. So yes, this is a new version of the game. This is a different project, but the same project. It's a reincarnation of it. And this project is a Godot project now. There were a few things I was worried would be difficult, I would be missing from Roblox, but I've convinced myself at this point, by looking at documentation and trying things out myself, that those things are really done better in Godot than in Roblox anyway, even the ones that I was worried about. As I've been kind of convincing myself that this will indeed work out as it should, I've actually made quite a bit of progress on some of the things that I thought were going to be complicated. And so I figure now is a good time to go over those things that I thought would be difficult in Roblox, but then also show you what I've done so far before I end up doing everything interesting on my own time. Because that wouldn't be fun for you guys. Oh yeah, the other thing that bugged me about Roblox is that I can't play my own game anymore because I use Linux and Linux is blocked on Roblox. That's great. I can't play the thing that I spent hours and hours making. So yeah, another huge advantage of Godot then is that you actually control the stuff that you make. You're not beholden to some company or some closed source platform that can restrict access at any moment.
Ooh, this is Serpent of the Future. We interrupt this program for the originally intended program, the Roblox stuff, and my ideas about switching from Roblox to Godot. Right at that last cut, I started recording episode 2, which is about what I've done so far as code goes. But yeah, I just mentioned a bunch of things that bugged me about Roblox, so what about the things that are good about Roblox that I was really hoping would still be a thing in Godot? This is a little notes file about the project, and at the start, I just added this section about the things that were worrying me before I started. One of the things that scared me was networking, syncing the game state between players, clients. The next thing was, what do I do if I don't have Roblox's servers? Do I have to host my own servers, or pay for remotely hosted servers or something? So I guess those are kind of similar. Next was physics. I don't really want to code a physics engine, not right now. Then rendering, of course, and the kind of environments that you can set up in Roblox where you have fog and sky color and that kind of cool stuff, switching with the map. And then there's the player base issue. Well, that turned out to not work out very well on Roblox, but I was expecting maybe some people would be able to discover it and play it on that platform, and then we'd all have a great time playing together. That didn't actually happen. And then, of course, there's integrating with code. Roblox has its objects and its things that you drag into the workspace, and you can reference them in code in a roundabout fashion. And I didn't know how that would happen in Godot. Oh yeah, and I'm just going to add here another one, which was pathfinding. I want to add computer-controlled units to this version of the game, which I didn't really do in Roblox, but that means pathfinding is also something I was thinking about. So given that those were the things that worried me, I feel like it's probably worth mentioning briefly how they're done on Godot so that they won't worry you, or at least the solutions that I'm finding for them. And I should clarify before I get too far along here that this is not really a tutorial series. I'll try to show you a bunch of what I'm doing and bring you along in the process of me working on this project and developing the game that I wanted to build. So I'm trying to share useful information with you and have a good time, but I'm not an expert with this stuff, and we can probably all learn from my mistakes. So when it comes to networking and servers, obviously Godot doesn't provide you with any servers themselves. So you're going to have to, if you want multiplayer, make with their tools a way of opening a server runtime to client requests. And there's a whole page of documentation about this, which I do recommend you skim through at least. But Godot actually makes this really easy. I was shocked. I'm not going to go into all the details here because the documentation is more thorough and accurate than I could ever be. But the general idea here is that there's a high-level abstraction layer so that all you have to do, or all I have to do with my project here, is indeed initialize the network, so create a client representation of the network on clients and a server representation on servers. Then later you can use connection events to track information about the connected players. You can set up an authentication system where, for example, the person hosting the server provides a password that has to be supplied on the client end in order to get access to the server, which is done with the auth callback and complete auth, and indeed supplying authentication data and stuff like that. They have code examples, I won't read them verbatim. But then once you're authenticated and you have this connection set up, you can call functions remotely. For example, if you shoot a bullet on your screen, other people should have that same bullet appear in their version of the game. So you need to call a function on their end to make it appear. And that's done just by annotating a method with RPC. Then you can also supply some properties to determine how exactly it can be called. But then later on, once you've annotated it, you can just say method.rpc. Or RPC ID to send to a particular player ID or something. That's so convenient. On Roblox, you have to set up network events, which are little things that you actually drag into the workspace and have to store somewhere. And then you have to connect to them, and you have to do it all in Lua, so it's horrifying. So this is really nice. And I hinted there a little at the next bullet point, which was servers. I'm not going to try and host public servers with this game. I was deeply disappointed by that with Roblox because nobody played on it, right? So I want to redesign some of the core gameplay. On Roblox, it's a team-based third-person shooter where you may have 2 or 3 teams of 6 or so people, and you're all shooting each other. But I never managed to gather enough people to play it anyway, in that way. So what I'm going to do here is make it a peer-to-peer game where you have a small group of friends, and I'm going to add in-depth computer-controlled players which fill up the teams. And when I say in-depth, I mean in-depth. They should be challenging and interesting to fight against. That's my goal, and I have ideas on how to accomplish that. But yes, fill up the teams with computer-controlled units, so you have, again, 6 or 7 per team, and then allow the players to give commands to the computer-controlled units. So you get some of the same gameplay where you're running around trying to shoot your opponents, fighting over capture points and things, but you also have this troop control aspect that adds a bunch of strategy. You want to try and place your troops into maybe little groups, each of which is, say, pushing this command point, or fall back, or you two follow me, and we'll go in. Stuff like that. So that's my solution when it comes to servers. I'm not making the gameplay revolve around many players, just a few players. And that means a given player can host their own server and expect to have their friends join. So the servers and the networking are good. So the next object on this list is physics. Physics you don't really have to do much complicated with, because Godot has very nice objects already for you. So the idea is that you have visual objects and you have colliding objects that will be part of the physics interactions. So if we open up my character here, you can see we have this nested structure over on the left. And in general, everything in Godot is a scene, and you can nest scenes together and make new scenes and then drag them into other scenes. In my prototyping character model, we have the core and then some other stuff. And one of the other stuffs is this rig. And the rig here, this is the visuals. This is a model that I have put together and rigged in Blender and exported alongside an animations export that I can play together in Godot. And the visuals are attached to this colliding object. This object is kind of the core structure of our player, which has a camera and this object here, the collider, which is a collision shape 3D. And this is what detects collisions with other physics objects. So it's a little different from Roblox in that you have to actually choose for each object that will collide what shape it will have to collide with. But that's actually quite easy, and I think it makes for a much more performant setup than Roblox gives you by default. And it's also a more flexible system. Godot gives you several different kinds of things that can collide in several different kinds of ways. Again, I'm not going to read everything here in verbatim, but it's all in the documentation. And then, of course, you can do cool things like automatically generate the collision mesh. So in this scene here with the sort of skeleton of my Citadel map, I actually just told Godot to generate the mesh automatically. And that's not the most performant way of doing things, but it was what I wanted to do for prototyping. So what I'm trying to say here is that the collision and physics system is both flexible and user-friendly. So physics is another check. Then we have rendering, and rendering is just a drop-in upgrade. You can see we already have rendering by default, right? The game renders. You have actually more control over the rendering than you do in Roblox by quite a wide margin. you have control over lighting and shadows, various different render settings that you might expect in a proper video game, like anti-aliasing and VSync and all that stuff. And I mentioned previously that Roblox has that environment and fog and sun and stuff that you can program procedurally, and that's really cool. That also exists in Godot. So in this map, for example, we have an environment node and a directional 3D light node. So this one is the sun, and if we change the angle of the sun, you can see that the shadows and the sun itself change, and the environment has lots of cool settings to play with, truly. I've barely even begun poking at all the things that you can play with. So all of that is great. And if you want to know more about that, you can take a look at Bracky's video on lighting in Godot, which I would highly recommend alongside some of his other videos on Godot. So rendering is another check. Now, player base, I already mentioned kind of. I didn't get a player base on Roblox, so that was kind of a dud for me. In Godot, I will be able to design my game in such a way that I don't need a large player base in order to have fun with it. So I'm checking that one off my list as well. Integrating with code is a huge win over Roblox. I didn't know how it was going to work before I started, but let me just give you a little teaser of how nice it is. And this is coming from me in the future, so stay tuned for this. So general objects in Godot have various properties, and you can set them in the editor. But what you can also do is define your own properties that will be available in the editor. So this is my flintlock rifle. It's what I'm using to prototype the guns as I develop that system. And you can see that it has this weapon core, which has ammo properties, heat properties, charge, firing, handling, damage, and they're all nested into their own categories. It's amazing. I can give them units to be displayed. I can give them sliders. And all of this is kind of an instance of a weapon core. So the weapon core itself is just a reference to this empty class here, or kind of empty class, which defines all of those properties. And it defines them in this script here, and all you have to do in order to produce those nice editor properties is export variable. Tell it what kind of variable it is. Give it extra information if you want the slider or something. And then later in the script, you just have that value. You don't have to wait for child and hope that some property object exists like you do in Roblox. And the code can have strong type hints, which give you constructive feedback and good completion suggestions. It's just a joy to work with compared to Lua. I've caught so many errors before they became a problem just by using GDScript instead of Lua. You can define classes! Classes, I tell you! So integrating with code is incredibly nice. Just gorgeous. And the last thing on my list was pathfinding. Now, pathfinding I haven't actually had a chance to work with yet, but I have watched some videos, so I'm an expert. But if we go over to the Citadel map again, and click on something here, then it gives us this mesh object, and it gives us the option to create a navigation mesh. And if we click this, it tells us why that mesh wouldn't be an appropriate thing to try and generate a navigation mesh from. Okay, so I've got some things to learn about navigation, but I remember watching a video about it, and if I look through the documentation, you can see that Godot provides many useful objects for navigating in 3D. And the idea would be that you take some region or some objects, you tell Godot to make a navigation mesh from those objects, and then you can ask the navigation server to find paths through the mesh and move your little characters around in that region. So yes, pathfinding is also a check. But yeah, with that, I think it's a reasonable place to end this video. I feel like we've wrapped up what I wanted to talk about with the whole Godot versus Roblox thing. And in the next videos, I'll be going over the code that I have, and we'll start building the game together. And at some point, I'll also go over my setup of linked Blender files and how I integrate Blender with Godot in the smoothest possible way, so that all I have to do is export a file from Blender and it shows up perfectly in Godot. But yeah, that's all for another day, so stay tuned for that if you're interested, and until then, I will see you next time. Take care, bye bye.